If the timing of this video is right, then exactly 20 years ago, Microsoft's most popular ever version of Windows was released to the public. And in today's video, we're going to find out exactly how Windows XP changed the future of computing, as well as explore actually using XP as a daily driving operating system in 2021. On the 25th of October 2001, Windows XP was made available to the general public for the very first time, and this marked the first time consumers had access to the new NT operating system architecture, previously reserved only for enterprise customers in the form of Windows 2000. For many, Windows XP was the first time people were actually excited about a new operating system.
Hey buddy, you're gonna be done with this XP workstation anytime soon.
Hey, this is really cool.
And that's largely due to Microsoft's more than $1 billion marketing budget. Events even featured well-known figures such as former New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani. With headlines across the globe focusing on the release, many don't actually know that the final advertising slogan, "Yes You Can," was actually a last-minute replacement for the originally planned slogan of "Prepare to Fly," which, believe it or not, was actually changed last minute in the face of the 9/11 attacks. And that explains why we have these strange adverts where users of XP can be seen flying around restaurants and offices for seemingly no reason whatsoever. But Windows XP wasn't just popular because of its near infinite advertising budget. It brought a wealth of improvements over previous versions. The new art style for XP caught the attention of users who had been subjected to the dull, boring, bland appearances of previous operating systems. And though this did make XP a significantly more demanding OS to run, XP came with a host of infrastructure improvements to help battle this, including being the first version of Windows to release a feature called prefetching, which significantly reduced startup and application launch times. There were also a wide variety of networking features added to the OS, but the list of changes and upgrades is so long we won't have time to cover them all in this video. The point is, Windows XP was a huge jump forwards in comparison to the previous iteration of the consumer Windows operating system, Windows 98. And though the design language has changed greatly since the release of XP, users of Microsoft's most recent OS, Windows 11, will still be able to comfortably navigate Windows XP, as fundamentally, very little has actually changed in that 20-year period. So then, if the layout of Windows XP is so similar to Windows 10, and people love XP so much, why aren't more people using it? Well, to answer that question, I've built this PC. This is a roughly Windows XP era PC that I've built to run Windows XP in all of its former glory. It's featuring an Intel E5300 dual-core CPU, 4GB of DDR2 RAM, and an NVIDIA 9800 GT. For our boot drive, Windows XP never would have ran on an SSD, so this PC is featuring an absolutely huge 200GB IDE Maxtor hard drive. Installing Windows XP was both a dream and a nightmare. I often forget about the difficulties of installing operating systems when USB boot support is spotty at best. This system was much happier booting and installing from a disk, but that's fine, I have an abundance of Windows XP installation CDs. But here is where things start to get strange. Over the years, I have fallen into the belief that operating systems have become even easier to install than they were previously. And whilst this is true from a technical level, the installation wizards of modern Windows operating systems have only become more bloated and confusing as time has gone on. The installation process for XP? Not once was I asked about advertising preferences or sending usage data. The operating system felt like mine and less like a phone home machine with a direct connection to Microsoft HQ. With Windows XP installed, the first thing to do is get all the drivers and software installed on top. That would usually be a simple case of going online and downloading all the relevant files. With XP in 2021, connecting this thing to the internet is a bit like walking through a school hallway with a sign on your back that says "Kick me." It's just asking for trouble. So what can we do to improve the security of Windows XP? Well, by default, Windows XP had 3 major expansions: Service Pack 1, 2, and 3. Each of these brought new quality of life and security patches. Unfortunately, the last of these was Service Pack 3, and that was released in June 2008. Since then, Windows XP has been largely left to the community, and luckily for us, a user by the name of Harkaz created and released community-made Service Pack 4 in 2014. Service Pack 4 came with a variety of improvements, but one of the most important was a method of obtaining official Microsoft security updates. This worked by tricking the Microsoft update servers into sending security updates for a POS, or point of sale version of Windows called Windows Embedded POS Ready 2009, which was available for industry terminals like ATMs rather than public desktops. This workaround continued to work until 2019, when the POS operating system fell out of support. That meant that until 2019, Windows XP running Service Pack 4 was actually a semi-secure operating system. But Service Pack 4 wasn't just about security. It made other changes too, including updates for other Windows XP components and a variety of .NET Framework updates. So nothing particularly feature-rich, but certainly a good set of updates to keep the system ticking along, tidy and well kept. So even with these updates installed, can we finally use Windows XP again, or is it still a security nightmare? Okay, so this is more a do as I say, not as I do moment, because no, even with these updates, Windows XP is still not secure. There will be flaws and vulnerabilities, and you should never connect a Windows XP machine to your network. With that said, I will go ahead and do it anyway, because, well, I'll take the risk so that you guys don't need to. I have no intention of using Internet Explorer on this machine. I may be crazy, but I'm not clinically insane. So Google Chrome it is. But unfortunately, you'll find that many websites don't work as you'd expect. Take the Steam website for example here. The web page loads, but only in its most basic possible form. And in fact, I can't even download Steam from this page. So we're going to have to look for a different browser. I've seen a number of online recommendations, including Kmelion, which is supposed to be a great browser for XP. However, I had the best luck with Firefox. Sure, it wasn't the most up-to-date version, nor was it particularly fast, but it was certainly good for loading pages in the format I would expect to see them. And so then, we can open the Steam webpage and download it. Let's get it installed. And unfortunately, this is where we start to run into issues. See, since Windows XP stopped being supported by Microsoft, it also stopped being supported by developers, and that meant that many pieces of software no longer work, or that they're just blocked from working by the developers themselves. Until 2020, there was an old version of the Steam client available on archive.org, which allowed you to access Steam on Windows XP, though unfortunately this has been patched by Valve, thus making Steam inaccessible on the operating system. Sure, there is probably an obscure workaround that you can still use, but the wider point is that Steam is actively trying to block your access from Windows XP. And this is by far the biggest issue with Windows XP in my opinion. Any software that relies on the connection to a server owned exclusively by a third party, that software no longer belongs to you, even if you paid for it. And that's entirely because the server owner has complete control over whether or not you can access the software. At any time, they can cancel support or revoke your access, and there is nothing you can do about it, nothing whatsoever. Since Steam no longer supports Windows XP, they've blocked my access to my entire game library when accessed via Windows XP. I have no way of accessing my Steam library on this machine, even if the games themselves do support Windows XP natively. So if you own a retro game on Steam that is only supported on older operating systems, Steam's lack of XP support means that even if you have all the required hardware, you can't run the game that you paid for. Hence why I'm gathering a collection of my favourite childhood games on physical media. That way, if I decide to play some of the original Far Cry in the year 2072, Steam and Microsoft have no power to stop me. And this is also why services like GOG are amazing and should be supported at all opportunities. Their lack of DRM means that you can always access the games you paid for and no one at any point can stop you. So then, 20 years on, can you still use Windows XP? Of course you can, but with one huge glaring issue. You can only use it for offline work. If you're using it for Office 2003, not an issue. If you're using it for offline CD-based games, not an issue. But as soon as you need to connect to the internet, Windows XP should not and cannot be used. XP still remains the most fondly remembered operating system, with its default wallpaper bliss being the most viewed photograph of all time. At its peak, Windows XP was being used by 80% of all desktop PCs. And whilst that number has now shrunk to roughly 0.6%, that is still an impressive number considering the limitations of Windows XP and the fact it's still more popular than its successor, Windows Vista, and almost as popular as Windows 8, a far more recent and secure operating system. And whilst I really wouldn't recommend using Windows XP in 2021, you could probably get by for basic web surfing and admin work if you really had to. And so that's it. Windows XP, Microsoft's most memorable operating system. Gone, but never forgotten. What a legend. And so if you guys did enjoy that video, then be sure to hit like and get subscribed, and leave a comment down below letting me know if you still use Windows XP, and if you don't, when was the last time you used Windows XP? I'm guessing for the vast majority of you, it's going to be quite a while ago, so hopefully this video was a bit of a trip down nostalgia lane. Anyway guys, I'll see you next